This happened years ago back when I was still a kid who really hated camping. The dirt, the bugs, the uncomfortable nights on a sleeping bag that somehow always felt like a rock by morning. It was just never my thing. But somehow I'd found myself camping more times than I cared to count. It was always my dad's idea. He's one of those rugged, wilderness-loving types, and every summer without fail he'd drag me and his equally rugged friends into the woods to disconnect from technology and reconnect with nature. By the time I hit sophomore year of high school, I was fed up. I'd had enough of suffering in silence, so I finally convinced him to let me bring a friend along, figuring it might make the whole thing at least a little bit bearable. To my surprise, he agreed without much fuss, so I brought Evan, my friend from school. Now you'd think having Evan along would only make it worse considering he was a hardcore Boy Scout and actually loved camping. But Evan was cool about it. He teased me for hating it, but he wasn't one of those, "You're not a real man unless you love the outdoors" types. Plus, I figured if I had to suffer at least, I'd be suffering with someone who could actually make a fire. He could set up a tent without turning it into a full-blown disaster. Evan was stoked to come partly because he loved camping, but also because back then, he was always looking for an excuse to escape his parents. Unfortunately, from the moment we arrived, things started going sideways. It turned out that one of my dad's friends had messed up the campsite booking. Instead of a remote, peaceful spot deep in the woods, we ended up at a crappy, overdeveloped campsite. Indoor bathrooms, paved walkways, and a playground for little kids. It wasn't camping. It was like glorified backyard living, or as some might call it, glamping. My dad was furious, and as if that wasn't bad enough, we didn't discover the real nightmare until later. Just next door to our campsite was a mini amusement park. Not even joking, an actual amusement park with carnival games, a Ferris wheel, and roller coasters. The whole thing was surreal. Who combines a campsite with an amusement park? It was like two completely incompatible worlds collided. My dad and his friends were grumbling about how this wasn't real camping, and Evan wouldn't stop saying it either. "This isn't real camping," he kept repeating like I needed the reminder. It got old fast and I was getting irritated. Sure, I hated camping, but I knew what it was supposed to look like. Finally, I told Evan to knock it off. He did, but the whole situation just sucked. We had driven hours to get here. We couldn't just leave. So we did what we could to make the best of it. The adults sulked for a while, then eventually started setting up camp. Evan, of course, stepped up like it was his time to shine. Within minutes, he had the tent up, the knots tied perfectly, the rain flies secure. It was like something straight out of a manual. Even my dad, who only ever gave compliments if someone was bleeding or unconscious, nodded in approval. That got under my skin a little. Evan and I were sharing a tent, and after dinner we slipped away under the guise of organizing our stuff. Truth was, Evan had brought a little metal pipe and some weed in an old Altoids tin. Nothing too crazy, just enough to take the edge off. Back then, we were in that delinquent phase where we liked breaking the rules and hanging out in places we weren't supposed to. I don't smoke anymore, and part of me wonders if I ever did it just to feel rebellious. We snuck into the woods giggling the entire time. We weren't too worried about smelling since we figured we'd be avoiding the adults for the rest of the night. After finishing up, we headed back to the tent. A few hours of lying there talking about school and other friends, and we both realized we had way too much energy to sleep. Evan had that mischievous grin on his face, and I knew exactly what he was thinking. He suggested we explore the campsite, but then revealed he meant the amusement park. Suddenly, I was all in. Climbing stuff was our thing, and the thought of scaling a roller coaster was exhilarating. After making sure everyone was asleep, we grabbed our flashlights and made our move. It was well after midnight. We scaled the fence easily, just a little boost from Evan, and slipped into the park. It was dark, and we could hear the faint hum of security guards patrolling golf carts driving by every so often. It felt like a video game sneaking around trying not to get caught. At one point, we sprinted across an open stretch of road to avoid a guard. The thrill of it was wild but also terrifying. We knew the stakes. If we got caught, it'd be bad. We finally made it to the roller coaster, and from up close, it looked even bigger than it had from the campsite. We spotted the maintenance stairs running up alongside it. Without hesitation, we started climbing. The metal rungs clanged softly under our feet, and we moved slowly, trying to avoid making too much noise. It was a bit terrifying, especially when we reached parts with no railings. When we finally got to the top, the view was incredible. We could see the entire park lit up below us. We snapped a quick photo to remember the moment, but we didn't take more. We didn't want to risk drawing attention. After a few minutes of soaking it all in, we decided we'd pushed our luck far enough. Heading back down was quicker, but it felt like the park was getting more and more unnerving. As we were nearing the fence, we froze. A guard was making a round in a golf cart. We ducked behind a snack shack to wait him out. That's when I saw something move in the dark. At first I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks, but then Evan tapped me. I looked over and saw a figure about 30 feet away, crouching between two buildings, moving like we were trying to avoid detection. It wasn't a kid either. The worst part, I was pretty sure he was looking right at us. We froze, not knowing what to do. The guards were still patrolling, and this guy was giving us a bad vibe. Then the figure darted across a patch of light, and for a split second I saw him clearly. He was a man disheveled with a tattered shirt and this awful twisted mark on his body. But it was his face that got me. The dark liquid smeared across it looked like blood. Evan and I exchanged a terrified glance. When the guard finally passed, we didn't say a word. We just kept moving. We climbed back over the fence, landing on the other side in silence. No laughter this time. We just wanted to get back to the safety of our tent. Back in the tent, neither of us mentioned sleep. We just lay there trying to process what we'd seen. The best explanation we could come up with was that it was some homeless guy doing God knows what. Stupid, but we couldn't think of anything else. The next morning, things seemed normal. We had breakfast, started packing up for a fishing trip when one of the staff came by with an announcement. Apparently, a man had been stabbed and killed the night before at a lake a few miles away. They said the killer was still on the loose and gave a description of the suspect. Disheveled, shirtless, possibly bleeding. We didn't say anything. Evan and I exchanged a look. It hit us, that guy we saw last night. It was him. We never told my dad, we never told the Rangers. At that age, I was more concerned about staying out of trouble than doing the right thing. But I still kick myself for not speaking up. My statement could have helped catch a murderer. I'll never know what would have happened if we'd crossed paths with him that night. But I'll always wonder what could have been. This was back in October of 2016, during that creepy clown hysteria. Most of those sightings were hoaxes, but some were real. And what happened to me, that was real. This isn't your typical scary story, but trust me, it's worth hearing. It all started when I was 2 years out of undergrad and I was still figuring out what came next. I was enrolled in an online graduate certificate program at the same school where I'd earned my bachelor's, but honestly, I had way too much free time. So like many recent grads, I was hopping from one odd job to the next, searching for any gig that could fill the time and, of course, help me stack some cash. I lived on Indeed, let's just say it was my best friend. After weeks of driving the same 6 neighborhoods for DoorDash, making barely enough to cover my gas, I was itching for a change of pace. One night, as I was browsing job listings, something caught my eye. A private lifeguarding position at a hotel a few towns over. It didn't sound out of the ordinary at first, but as I read through the details, I got this odd feeling in my gut. For one, the hours were completely backwards. Instead of the usual hotel pool schedule, this job was from 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. It was a night shift for a pool. Something about it felt off. But that wasn't the strangest part. The listing specifically asked for someone who didn't speak Spanish. Let me pause here. I've been speaking Spanish since I was a kid. I'm half Mexican, and the town where this hotel was located had a large Spanish-speaking population. So to say I was confused would be an understatement. Why would they need someone who didn't speak Spanish? It didn't make sense. But here's the thing, the pay was $30 an hour. That was like finding a gold bar in your backyard back then. I knew I could ignore the weirdness if the money was good enough. So I applied. I figured the job was either brand new or they were desperate. To my surprise, I heard back quickly and was invited to interview. Fast forward to my first day. I pulled up to the hotel. It looked perfectly normal, the kind of place you'd expect for a middle-tier hotel. As I got out of my car, a short, pudgy guy came out to greet me. He seemed nice enough, cracking jokes and making small talk as we walked into the complex. But as we neared the entrance, another guy appeared from around the corner. This guy was taller, colder, and his eyes immediately locked onto mine. I could tell he was sizing me up. He walked straight over to me, and without even a greeting, he started speaking to me in Spanish. I didn't say a word, just stared blankly back at him. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was testing me. He wanted to see if I spoke Spanish, confirming the absurdity of the job listing. I could tell by the way he was looking at me that he knew. He paused for a moment, then turned to the first guy. They exchanged a glance and both burst out laughing. The tall guy flashed a grin and shook my hand. "Just messing with you." he said, introducing himself as Hefe while the other guy, still chuckling, was Esteban. The three of us walked toward the pool and Hefe began explaining the job. They were trying to increase revenue by allowing non-guests to use the pool at night for a fee. I didn't care what their reasoning was. I was just there to do my job. Then he mentioned something strange. If anyone showed me a blue wristband, I was supposed to let them into the pool house. It was a large building behind the lifeguard stand, and it was clearly off limits to the general public. I didn't ask questions. The first few weeks were uneventful. I collected money from the non-guests and kept an eye on the pool. No one showed me a wristband until about a month in. A muscular guy in a white button-down and sunglasses walked up to me, barely speaking any English. He showed me a blue wristband. I unlocked the pool house. He was in and out in no time, but when he walked out, his backpack seemed noticeably heavier. I brushed it off at the time, but looking back, I should have paid more attention. Over the next few weeks, more people started showing up with wristbands, groups of them all looking like they belonged together. More outsiders were using the pool, and the money I was collecting skyrocketed. It didn't take long for me to realize something was off. People were paying way more than they needed to. I called Hefe to ask about it, but he brushed it off quickly, saying it was just mistakes. He hung up mid-sentence. That's when it hit me. Money laundering. I didn't know for sure, but everything pointed to it. The pool house, the strange hours, the overpayments, it was all starting to add up. Part of me wanted to walk away, but the other part of me knew I couldn't. $30 an hour was too much to ignore. Things got weirder the more I stayed. The pool house wasn't just a pool house, it was a hub for something much darker. Patrons, especially the wristband people, started becoming more familiar with me. They learned my name, tipped me generously, and some even shared parts of their conversations in Spanish. It confirmed everything. This wasn't just a hotel job. This was something else. Then came the day I had to save a kid from drowning. It wasn't heroic, just a kid who strayed too far into the deep end. But when I brought him back to the surface, the crowd cheered. It was surreal. Hefe came down to personally thank me, claiming he owed me his life. That's when I realized the kid I saved was his son. The next day, Esteban and a group of other men were waiting for me at the gate, glasses of wine in hand. They toasted me. Everything seemed to be going great, until one of the men made a toast in Spanish. I didn't understand all of it, but I caught the gist. They were toasting to the money they were making and the lives they were destroying. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in way over my head. And then things took a turn. My mom called me that afternoon. She only called when something important was happening. I stepped away from the pool for some privacy, speaking to her in Spanish. When I turned around to go back to my post, Esteban was standing in my path, watching me closely. He asked how long I'd known Spanish, and I played dumb. My heart raced as I realized he wasn't just curious. He was trying to figure something out. Eventually, he simply nodded and walked away, but my fear lingered. A few minutes before my shift ended, he approached me again. He told me to come an hour early the next day for a new opportunity. He slipped me a couple $100 and then he walked off. I didn't hesitate. I left that night and never came back. The whole thing had been too strange, too dangerous. But even after leaving, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every van that passed my street, every unfamiliar car made my heart race. For months, I was paranoid. I still don't fully understand why they needed me. Why they needed someone who looked clueless enough to keep the cops off their backs. One thing I do know for sure, I was damn lucky to walk away that day. I was this close to something much darker than I could have ever imagined.